The wind had learned her name long before anyone else bothered to remember it. It slipped through the cottonwoods at dusk and pressed its palm against the small cabin as if checking whether she was still there. Clara Whitmore stood at the narrow window with a kerosene lamp in her hand, watching the last color drain from the sky. Evening always came slowly out here, stretching the minutes thin, making a woman feel every year she had spent alone. There's a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't ache anymore. It settles instead, like dust on a shelf no one touches. Clara had lived with that kind for so long, she sometimes forgot it wasn't the natural state of things. Years ago, she had learned to speak softly to herself, to move carefully, to leave no trace that might invite questions. The town sat miles behind her, close enough for its judgment to reach, far enough that no one ever came to see if she was all right. She had once belonged there. She could still picture the boardwalks warm under summer sun, the sound of laughter leaking out of open doors. But belonging was a fragile thing, easily taken back. A loss, a rumor, a look held too long. Sometimes it took only one wrong season for a woman to become a story others told without her permission. Clara never corrected them. Silence, she learned, was safer. That night, she had just set the kettle near the fire when the sound came. A knock. Not loud, not demanding, just firm enough to be real. She froze, the way a deer does when the forest shifts unexpectedly. No one knocked on her door. The town had decided long ago that Clara Whitmore was best left alone. The knock came again, patient, almost apologetic. She opened the door only a hand's width. Cold rushed in, carrying the smell of snow and road dust. A man stood there, shoulders slumped from travel, a baby bundled tight against his chest. The child's face was barely visible beneath a worn blanket, cheeks red from the cold, lashes dark against pale skin. The man removed his hat and held it low. His eyes were steady, tired in a way that went beyond hunger. "Ma'am," he said quietly, as if afraid of startling her. "We've been walking since morning. Could we stay one night?" One night. The words landed heavier than he knew. Clara's first instinct was fear, not of him, but of what the town would say if they saw another soul crossing her threshold. She felt old shame stir, the kind that never fully dies. Her fingers tightened on the doorframe. "I can't," she said too quickly. "You'll need to try the town." He nodded as though he had expected it. No anger crossed his face. No pleading followed. He adjusted the baby's weight and stepped back into the dark. The child stirred then, a thin cry breaking free, weak and exhausted, like something asking the world for permission to exist. The sound followed him down the steps. Clara closed the door, but the cry came through the walls anyway. It found her chest and stayed there. She pressed her palm flat against the wood, eyes closed, remembering nights when she herself had wished for one safe place, one warm room where no one would ask why she was alone. The kettle began to whistle. She took it off the fire, hands trembling. Outside, the wind rose, sharp and impatient. Clara thought of the baby's thin blanket, of the man's bowed shoulders. She thought of the years she had spent surviving when all she'd wanted was to be needed again. "Wait," she called before she could stop herself. The door swung open. The man turned, surprise flickering across his face. "You can stay," she said, "just for the night." Relief didn't explode out of him. It settled instead, like something carefully set down. He thanked her with a nod and stepped inside, boots heavy with dust. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, fuller. Clara gestured toward the stove. He sat where she pointed, keeping the baby close to the warmth. She brought water without being asked. He cleaned the child's face with gentle hands, murmuring sounds that were barely words. Clara watched from across the room, struck by the care in his movements. He did not look like a man who expected kindness. He looked like one who had learned to accept whatever came without protest. The baby quieted near the fire, breath evening out. Clara offered bread. The man broke it carefully, eating slowly, as if mindful of not taking more than his share. "I'm Jonah," he said after a while. "This is Samuel." "Clara," she replied. The name felt strange in her mouth, spoken aloud after so long. They spoke little after that. Silence filled the spaces between them, But it was a different kind of quiet than the one Clara knew. This one held warmth. She noticed how Jonah kept his body angled toward the baby, how his eyes never fully rested. Protection lived in his posture. When night deepened, she showed them where to sleep near the stove. She lay awake on her narrow bed, listening to the soft sounds of breathing, the occasional creak of wood as the fire settled. Her cabin, once hollow with absence, now held something fragile and alive. Clara realized, staring into the dark, that whatever came after this night, judgment, whispers, loss, she would remember this moment. The sound of a baby sleeping safely under her roof. The quiet gratitude of a stranger who had asked for nothing more than one night. And for the first time in years, the wind pressed against the cabin and did not feel like the only thing that knew her name. Morning did not arrive all at once. It crept in carefully, pale light slipping through the narrow window and settling on the floorboards like something unsure it was welcome. Clara woke to a sound she hadn't heard in years, soft movement that wasn't her own. The baby stirred near the stove, making small, questioning noises, and Jonah was already awake, rocking him with a slow patience that felt practiced, earned. Clara sat up, smoothing her hair out of habit, then paused. There was no one here to impress. Still, she felt suddenly seen in a way that unsettled her. Jonah looked up, offered a quiet nod, and went back to the child. No words were needed. The room spoke for them. Warmth lingering from the fire, the smell of last night's bread, the sense that something had shifted without asking permission. She made breakfast. Jonah repaired a loose hinge on the door with a bit of wire from his pocket. When Clara noticed, he shrugged, almost embarrassed. Small things passed between them like that. Help offered without announcement, care given without expectation. The baby smiled at her once, a sudden flash of trust that caught her off guard. She had to turn away, afraid of how easily her eyes burned. By mid-morning, the world beyond the cabin remembered them. Elias Crow rode past on his way to town, slowed, then looked twice. Word traveled faster than people out here. By afternoon, Clara could feel the eyes on her, even miles away. Judgment had a way of crossing distance. When Jonah stepped outside to gather water, Sheriff Boone appeared on the path, his badge catching the light. He asked questions that sounded polite but weren't. Where was Jonah headed? Why was he here? Clara stood in the doorway, hands folded, feeling the old weight settle back onto her shoulders. We're leaving soon, Jonah said before she could answer. His voice held no bitterness, only acceptance. The sheriff's gaze lingered on Clara a moment longer than necessary. See that you do, he said, and rode off. The silence that followed felt heavier than the one before. Jonah packed his things slowly. Clara watched, the room already beginning to empty in her mind. She thought of the years she had lived shrinking herself to fit inside other people's comfort. She thought of how easily she had almost done it again. Jonah hesitated at the door. Thank you, he said, for the night. Clara looked at Samuel, asleep against his father's chest, unaware of the roads ahead. Something steady rose in her then, quiet but unmovable. You can stay, she said. Not just tonight. Jonah's breath caught. He didn't speak right away. He simply nodded, eyes bright with something that looked like relief and respect combined. The town never fully approved. Whispers remained, but Clara no longer bent under them. Days grew into weeks. The cabin filled with life. Samuel's laughter, Jonah's steady presence, the shared rhythm of work and rest. Affection grew not through promises, but through mornings and meals, through choosing one another again and again. One evening, as the sun set low in gold, Clara stood at the door and understood what the years alone had been preparing her for. She had not been waiting to be rescued. She had been waiting to open the door. If you've ever been made to feel small or told your life was finished before it truly began, remember this. Dignity doesn't arrive loudly. It comes quietly, asking for one night, carrying all it has left. And sometimes, when you answer, you find you were never as alone as you believed.